Hi, I'm Julian Glover, an actor, and I'm speaking to you on Cracking the Code of Spy Movies with Dan and Tom.
The good, the bad, and the unique of Roger Moore as James Bond. Roger Moore played James Bond in 7 movies from 1973 to 1985. He has done the most Bond movies of any actor to play Bond. Yeah, Daniel Craig was Bond longer, but that's because it took Eon Production so long to put movies out, the pandemic, and all that kind of stuff. Roger Moore is tops in the number of Bond movies. So today, we look at the good, the bad, and the not ugly, the unique twists of the Roger Moore James Bond movies. Hi, this is Dan.
And Tom.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. So let's unmoor this boat and get sailing.
Oh, God, Dan. That may be your worst pun ever. Unmoor. Oh, my God.
Roger Moore did the most James Bond films, but is Roger Moore tops in performance, quality of the movies, a fan favorite? Clearly, Moore's role as Bond has had its highs and lows. But if you did multiple James Bond movies, well, critics will always rank them one way or another. We're going to do that too.
Well, and the stories were not necessarily all written to the same quality, and they took some chances, like with Live and Let Die. So you are going to get some different opinions as to what's high and low in his collection of movies.
That's all true. Yeah. Sean Connery had some of his Bond movies considered better than others. Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and Thunderball. They were considered his top movies by many. So let's take a look at the Roger Moore Bond movies and see where we stand.
Roger Moore's James Bond movies were different. He brought a sense of campy humor to the role, while there was still plenty of exciting action. He brought a different feel as well, with his clothing, with what he smoked, his facial expressions, which sometimes borderlined on vaudevillian. Some people loved that, others did not. I liked how he worked this role, but the writing was handled differently once Roger helmed the role of James Bond, in part because of Moore's acting skills.
Yeah, I mean, in real life, Moore did not like guns. Going back to an incident where a gun exploded in his hands once, before any James Bond stuff. And so he did not like them. So read his book, My Word is My Bond. And he did not like to be a violent Bond. He said that sort of characterization didn't sit well with me.
Yeah, this is what I was trying to say a minute ago.
Yeah.
I mean, they were different, and I actually think it's kind of interesting that you have a guy who didn't like guns or violence playing an assassin.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
But with him, they had to change how they wrote the movies, and which they actually did with each new actor that came into the role.
Yeah, they did that. Right. And also in his book, Bond on Bond, when he first took the role of James Bond, he said, quote, I didn't necessarily believe that Bond was a man who enjoyed killing. Then Moore says, when I reread the Fleming novels, there was a line that stated Bond did not particularly enjoy killing. And that, he said, was the key to my interpretation of the role. I wouldn't enjoy killing, but I'd do it professionally, quickly, and accurately. Okay, that pretty much sums up how Roger Moore took this role on.
Yeah, he did seem to enjoy taking out Locke, though. And I think it's kind of an interesting observation because Connery's Bond, I think, did enjoy killing to a degree. I mean, think about the look on his face after Sean Connery's Bond killed Professor Dent.
Yeah.
There was like a satisfaction there, if not an outright enjoyment from that kill. He didn't really crack a smile, but there was a feeling of content that came over him. Yeah. And that said, he also was willing to let Kiran Bey kill Krylenko in From Russia with Love. So he was not like, I have to do all the killing. But as you said, Moore's Bond was different.
He was different. And we'll talk about that Locke thing again, because he wasn't too thrilled about that. Another interesting fact with Moore as Bond is that Roger Moore's Bond never himself orders a martini, shaken, not stirred. There are times when others ordered it for him. Remember Agent Triple X and The Spy Who Loved Me orders one for him and so on. But Moore, as Bond, never ordered one for himself. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's different. That's different.
Yeah, and some of the ways that he changed the role is he preferred to smoke cigars, not cigarettes. Yeah. I mean, he was the first Bond to smoke a cigar. In Live and Let Die in 1973, Moore's Bond lights up a Monte Cristo #1. This was an interesting change, in part because Fleming wrote the character of Bond as a cigarette smoker because Fleming himself was a heavy cigarette smoker.
Yeah. And Moore was a big cigar smoker. And actually, in one of his books, again, he says that all the cigars he smoked on set when they were taking breaks and stuff, he had to pay for himself. He said that wasn't included in his contract. There you go. All right. And Roger Moore never wore a trilby hat while playing James Bond either. So he made a lot of different.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, he did a lot of different stuff. So Roger Moore did bring a new twist to the James Bond persona. Now let's look at his Bond movies. Where is he ranked among the James Bond actors? Well, for classic Bond fans, he ranks often behind Connery and Craig. For action-oriented fans, he's in the middle somewhere. He's ranked below Craig, Dalton, and Connery. For Bond fans who love fun, witty Bond movies, well, of course, he's going to be number 1 or 2. There's no question about that. He's brought humor to the role for sure. All right.
So, I'm not sure where you got that list and if that's the way you're thinking too, because ranking the James Bond actors is always tough for me. It's like saying, what's your favorite Bond movie? Depending on the day, I'm going to give you a different answer.
Yeah, this is a conglomerate of what people think in general.
Yeah. Now, for me, though, other than Daniel Craig, the order switches for me, and it's close. Connery's number 1, but then it gets jumbled. Right now, I would probably put Timothy Dalton and George Lazenby as 2 and 3, and I don't know which is 2 and which is 3 today.
Yeah, okay.
As the order switches. Roger Moore, I'd put 4th. Pierce Brosnan, I'd put 5th. And Daniel Craig 6th, even though I loved him in Casino Royale. I just don't like where he took the character after that. In each movie, it got weirder and weirder for me. That puts Roger in 4th place for me.
Yeah. Again, we did it by classic Bond, action-oriented fans who love fun, witty Bond. So it's different than what you're just saying right now. You're just ranking them. All right. So here we go. Let's take a look at the best and the worst of Roger Moore's tenure. A fan favorite for his best is The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. Now, I think this is certainly one of Roger Moore's best outings as James Bond.
And I agree.
Yeah. And the movie is so well done that it can easily be a fan favorite, not just with more Bond movies, but overall for all Bond movies. It is one of his 2 best performances as Bond. The other one I like is For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah, so what do you think makes The Spy Who Loved Me so good? After all, it's basically You Only Live Twice with submarines instead of space capsules.
Yeah, here's why it's great, all right? It's a perfect balance of action, humor, and spectacle. The location scenes and the camera work is fantastic in this. We mentioned the campiness of Moore's Bond, yeah, but The Spy Who Loved Me, it strikes a near-perfect balance, capturing the essence of what made Moore's Bond unique, charming, witty, and adventurous, without going too much over the top. And that's why this is a good one.
I agree with you. I do think this made for Moore's best outing, in part because of what you just said. I think another reason is the introduction of the legendary but somewhat campy villain, Jaws.
Yeah, Jaws. He was popular.
Yeah, and in this movie, I mean, he's a henchman. He's not the villain, but he's a lot more impactful in this movie than Stromberg was. And he's become one of Bond's most memorable villains. He's seemingly indestructible. I mean, this steel-toothed henchman made for one of the most iconic adversaries in the franchise's history. Everyone who knows about James Bond knows about Jaws. And of course, Jaws was played by Richard Kiel. He's so likable and accepted a villain that they brought him back 2 years later in Moonraker because he was a fan favorite.
And it was the chemistry between Roger Moore and Richard Kiel that made Jaws so endearing, really. The 2 of them worked very well together. All right. Now, you got to look at why this is a great movie. The pre-title sequence is one of the best pre-title sequences in any James Bond movie, featuring the great opening stunts that everybody knows. Some of the greatest in Bond history, like Bond skiing off a cliff and deploying a Union Jack parachute. This was a surprise, breathtaking, and when the Union Jack chute opened, wow, the audience
that was stunning. It really was.
Everybody got blown away by it. Rick Sylvester did the ski stunt, and he had not really done it before. He had a still photo ad of him jumping off a snow cliff for a Canadian whiskey company that the Eon production people saw, and they asked him, hey, do this for The Spy Who Loved Me, not realizing at the moment that he really had not skied off the cliff for the ad. It was just a still shot.
No, I thought it was a shot of something a lot less dangerous looking. I thought it wasn't really the Asper clip, but he still was.
No, it wasn't that clip.
Right.
Cliff. It was he was skiing off something.
Yeah.
But he did it, and in one take, and only one camera caught the action. Fortunately, the other cameras didn't.
Well, yeah, because if you rewatch this, like, can you imagine if they missed it
Yeah.
first? Because they had a couple cameras, only one got it. But when he releases his skis and the chute opens, he
Hmm.
almost gets taken out by one of the skis in the air. I mean,
Yeah,
that would
yeah,
have been
right.
a disaster.
Yeah,
Plus,
comes very close
you have
to
to
the shoot.
love James Bond on snow skis, right? We first saw Bond on skis and on Her Majesty's Secret Service, but Moore handles this very well here.
Yeah, right. And let's look at the women too in this movie. This Bio Love Me has a very memorable Bond girl. Anya Amasova, played by Barbara Bach, of course, she's unlike some of the Bond girls we've seen before. She was a strong, capable Soviet agent who matched Bond in skill and intelligence. And that was a very welcome and refreshing thing to see. Again, played by Barbara Bach, she was perfect for that role. So fabulous. We also get some of the classic gadgets. The Lotus Esprit submarine car. Oh, that was awesome. We had seen plenty of versions of the Aston Martin. This sleek Lotus Esprit that transforms into a submarine is one of the coolest Bond cars ever, and a radical leap in Bond car gadgets. Every Bond fan knows this car. It made such a great, lasting impression on anyone who saw this movie.
Oh, and Moore makes this car work for him. I mean, he plays that scene of driving in the water, making it look like child's play. He looks
Yeah.
like this is no big deal. I know I'm going to go to the water. Who cares? Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've
He
never
knew.
done it before, at least not in a movie, but I'm going to trust this gadgetry. I
Yeah.
know I would have looked scared if
Yeah.
that was me and I'm going like getting ready to plunge into the water.
Yeah. Hope Q's car works.
The car
Yeah.
works, but Roger Moore's Bond, calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah. And Tom and I, we visited all of the filming locations for the big Lotus chase in Sardinia, Italy.
That was fun.
Yeah, that chase scene goes down as one of the best chase scenes too in any Bond movie, and the location, wow, that was spectacular. Highly recommended.
Well, really, all of the locations for this movie were really cool.
Yeah.
They filmed the underwater Lotus stuff in the Bahamas, although him driving out of the water, they do film in Sardinia. There was some very cool location scouting for sure, everywhere from Egypt's pyramids to underwater layers and Sardinia. It was really
Yeah.
awesome the way they did the locations in this movie.
Yeah, and the movie featured breathtaking set pieces too. The Liparus ship that could
Yeah,
hold the submarines that it captured was one of the best set pieces ever. Of course, the great, brilliant Ken Adam was behind all that.
you've got to love his work.
Yeah,
Now, the film's plot featuring stolen nuclear submarines felt high stakes and exciting, even
yeah,
though, as we mentioned, it was very similar to You Only Live Twice's plot. And
yes,
generally, the concept of Stromberg building an underwater civilization, a little far fetched for me.
yeah. Well, he's not as famous as Blofeld. Stromberg's underwater lair and the world domination scheme made him a classic Bond villain, and it was entertaining, which is the point. And the underwater lair was a great set piece too. Yeah, Ken Adam again. Unfortunately, Bond didn't have a lot of interaction with Stromberg, really. So we didn't get to see the same chemistry between Moore and Kurt Jurgens as we did with him and Richard Kiel. So Richard Kiel kind of really took on a big role here.
Yeah, now, remember, only the title of the movie came from Ian Fleming. Fleming wasn't happy with his story, and he didn't want this turned into a movie, they say.
Yeah, right. And we have to mention that Caroline Monroe was in this too. She was great. We mentioned in other podcasts that we met with her in London for a few hours, and she was just a delight to spend time with.
Oh, yes, she was.
Awesome. All right. And now let's not forget the memorable theme song. Nobody does it better. Carly Simon's theme song is one of the best in Bond history, perfectly capturing the suave and romantic tone of Moore's Bond, and is just a memorable theme song among all of the Bond songs. Certainly one of my favorites.
Well,
Great.
I think you like this one better than I do, Dan.
Oh,
Of all the Roger Moore movies, I prefer Live and Let Die and For Your Eyes Only better.
yeah.
And Nobody Does It Better isn't bad. I just it's not one of my favorite Bond themes.
All right, we're throwing our 2 cents in here too, and we're looking at what the world in general thinks. So, all
Well,
right,
hey,
so
I
we have
am
some
the world in general, Dan.
we have some differences. No, no, okay. All right, so finally, we need to look at this movie's legacy and its influence. The Spy Who Loved Me solidified Moore as a great Bond after two decent but uneven outings. This was a centerpiece for Moore, and it's often regarded as one of the top 5 Bond movies of all time. It has all of the right elements, from Jaws to the larger-than-life villain lair, the chases, all in one way or another have been homaged in later Bond movies for sure.
Okay, so if that's the best, let's
Yeah,
get to the worst Roger Moore James Bond movie, at least from a fan's viewpoint.
yeah,
And of
right.
course, we're talking about A View to a Kill from 1985.
Yeah. Why do people think this is bad?
Well, by this point, Roger Moore was 57.
Oh, yeah. 57. I can remember when I was 57, I think.
Yeah, well, he was 57. His action scenes felt a little unrealistic. His romantic pairings were very awkward. I
Yeah.
mean, he was old enough to be the grandfather. Wait a minute. Maybe not the grandfather, but certainly the father of his love interests. He was 22 years older than Tanya Roberts, who played Stacy, 21 years older than Grace Jones, who played Mayday, and 29 years older than Fiona Fullerton, who played Pola Ivanova. You know,
Yeah.
this was a little creepy almost.
Yeah. I mean, the Bond girl, Stacey Sutton, Tanya Roberts, you mentioned, she was one of the weakest, I think, and most helpless in the series. We liked her, but she was no Agent Triple X, Anya Amasova.
Yeah, they can't all be strong, but I did like the chemistry between Tanya Roberts and Roger Moore. I thought they worked well together.
Yeah.
And this was also a more lethargic movie. It lacked some of the energy of Moore's earlier outings as Bond. And part of
Yeah.
that's because Moore seemed to be out of place. He shouldn't have done this movie. I think he should have quit after Octopussy.
Well, he thinks so too. I mean, he actually said that. So he agrees with you, Tom.
Hey, you know, great minds think alike and all that.
Yeah. Christopher Walken's Max Zorin character, he was a decent villain. I actually liked his plan to flood Silicon Valley so he can control the chip industry. Look today who controls the chip industry. But as a villain, he was overshadowed by the movie's pretty much dull pacing. Though, when he was crazy in the movie, he was crazy looking and he did well playing that role.
Wait, dull pacing. You got a pacing problem with this movie, Dan?
Yeah, we do have a basic problem with
Yeah,
it. I think most people did. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
but you can't have a problem with Chris Walken. I mean,
No, he was good.
ever since I saw him in The Deer Hunter in 1978,
Yeah.
I've been a huge Christopher Walken fan.
He was
He's
good.
He's a great actor who can play crazy very, very well.
He
And
did
to
here.
me, he was the best part of this movie. Although I
Yeah.
know there are a lot of people who thought he was the worst part of the movie. For me, he actually made this movie work for me. He can
Yeah.
never be the worst part in a movie, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. No, he was good. I mean, he was crazy. And I think I liked his character. Like I said, I liked what his plan was. And the theme song, Duran Duran's theme song, that was a highlight. Fans did like that one. Now, there are some things that are good in this movie. I did like the use of the blimp. We had not seen that before.
If you remember when we looked at the notes that Maybaum had out at the University of Iowa, he
Yeah.
had research on blimps.
Yeah,
A couple of
right.
years,
Oh, yeah.
he had some articles and stuff clipped a couple of years before they did this movie
How
about
about
blimps,
that?
and then he put that in.
Yeah, which was great. It was a unique thing.
But it shows the research behind some of these decisions too.
Yeah, a blimp chase. Great. The fire engine chase I thought was also cool and not done before. And I actually got to sit in the cab of that very fire engine because the Ian Fleming Foundation owns that vehicle. Now, the Eiffel Tower scenes, hey, they were intriguing. Actually, it almost didn't happen because the filmmakers, they tried to get permission to film on the Eiffel Tower and it wasn't going so well. So they say, I don't know if it's true or not, but they say they bribed the restaurant staff so they could shoot the scenes without interruption.
It's
I don't
amazing
know.
how a little bit of money placed into the right hands can get things done.
Yeah. And hey, we liked Grace Jones as Mayday, though she was probably an underdeveloped character in this movie. Probably could have done more with her. But there were some cool elements. And anyway, it's entertaining. And definitely on the low end of the more outings as Bond, though. So.
Yeah, see, I'm not a Grace Jones fan at all. I think she puts on such a I mean, this isn't as Mayday, just in general, she puts on such a weird act that's not in
Yeah,
my wheelhouse. So to see that in this movie doesn't work for me, but again, I'm saying that with the bias of I'm not a big Grace Jones fan.
yeah. Okay, all right. So, there you go. That's you.
All right, so what's Moore's second best Bond movie then? We talked about the best and we've talked about the worst. What's his second best? And fans think this is pretty close between Moore's first outing in Live and Let Die in 1973 and For Your Eyes Only in 1981.
Yeah, Live and Let Die. Hey, we have one of the best Bond theme songs ever by the amazing Paul McCartney, and a unique voodoo blaxploitation vibe throughout the whole movie. So that was interesting.
Yeah, now the blaxploitation stuff didn't age well, but it
No,
was spot on for the time.
it was great.
Eon Productions always tried to keep Bond up with the times, and this is definitely one example. The movie Shaft was released 2 years before this, and Trina Parks, who we've interviewed, who played Thumper from Diamonds Are Forever,
Right.
was in Darktown Strutters 2 years after Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
So we were right in the middle of the blaxploitation movies, and having Live and Let Die have the blaxploitation feel to it made sense when this was released.
Yeah.
And that said, I like this movie a lot. It gave us some great characters, both villains and friends. And
Yeah.
of course, we got Sheriff Pepper in this movie. He should have just stayed in this movie, but it was still a really good character.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very good Bond movie and very solid outing for Roger Moore as his first movie playing Bond. But we think, and I think most people think, that For Your Eyes Only ekes out Live and Let Die. And well, Moore often said that For Your Eyes Only was his favorite of his Bond movies because it was more serious and grounded. Okay, Live and Let Die is close to The Spy Who Loved Me, but we're going to go with Roger and side with Roger as well. For Your Eyes Only, we think, is a better movie.
So why do you think that, Dan?
All right, well, there's a lot of reasons why For Your Eyes Only 1981 is a very, very good movie and a little better than Live and Let Die. First of all, you got the return to this grittier, more realistic Bond. I like that. After the over-the-top sci-fi extravagance of Moonraker, 1979, this movie brought Bond back down to earth with a serious
you really went there.
With a serious and grounded espionage plot. I liked it. It was refreshing to see and something the audience can latch onto as a potentially real scenario in life that a spy could be involved with. I like that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, the realism is it. There are no supervillains, no space battles, no crazy outrageous gadgets, just more or less a classic Cold War kind of intrigue that permeated the entire movie and made it very entertaining.
Yeah, and it had a strong espionage storyline. That is what made the early Bond movies with Sean Connery, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger. That's what made those so strong.
You mean it's a spy movie?
It's a spy movie. The plot revolves around Bond recovering a stolen ATAC device, a British missile control system device. Before it falls into the Soviet hands, they got to get it. Well, this is a great concept. And stuff like that happened, of course, in World War II with the Allies attempting to capture the German Enigma machine, which was a coding device. So this was good. I loved it.
Okay, so we're saying For Your Eyes Only really unfolds as a classic spy thriller rather than a campy action adventure that some of Moore's movies became.
Yeah.
It also does have some great action sequences, right? There's that rock climbing scene in Meteora is just amazing. I mean, Bond has to scale that cliff. He doesn't have any gadgets.
No.
It's one of the most intense moments in the series. Beautifully photographed. No, kind of hard on location not for that to be beautiful. And it created tension throughout.
Yeah.
The fall from the side of the cliff was so well done. Again, the stuntman here, Rick Sylvester, who we mentioned, did the ski jump also in the pre-title sequence to The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, he was a little nervous about that one because
I would have too.
The clamps have to hold, Yikes! All right, the thrilling car chase also in the Alps, where Bond drives the Citroen 2CV instead of a gadget-loaded Aston Martin. I thought that was a little different, right? This was amusing.
after this, we've seen it in things like, Bourne, right? I mean, Bourne does
Yeah.
a chase like that too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was amusing at the time. His Lotus Esprit had just been blown up, as we remember, and he and Melina Havelock used her car to escape. And it was just a trunk. Which, what the heck?
Yeah, not exactly what you think of the sleek James Bond getaway car.
No, no. And we saw a version of that car as well, too. The Ian Fleming Foundation owns that as well. Now, the underwater sequences were really well done, visually striking, and great lighting and photography. Just well shot. Just good. Solid.
Yeah, and you just mentioned her, but it's got a very strong independent Bond girl in
Yes.
Melina Havelock.
Terrific.
I mean, Carol Bouquet's Melina is one of the most capable Bond women in the series.
Yeah.
She's seeking revenge for her murdered parents with her signature crossbow, which she looked good with. And she did just a stunning job in this role. Some of the critics said she was too flat or too emotionless, but we think they're wrong because in the story, her parents had just been murdered. She's seeking revenge. She doesn't have a lot to smile about. And again, she uses that crossbow, which is just an awesome weapon in my book.
Yeah. That's a great scene with her and the crossbow. She's not just a damsel in distress, but she's an active participant in the mission, which I like. That's great.
Yep.
And then you got a great villain twist. The movie sets up Christatos, Julian Glover, as an ally, but later reveals him as the real villain, making for a refreshing twist. And though he is not an over-the-top villain, he is, in our opinion, a very realistic villain, which we like. He's like a Franz Sanchez from License to Kill. We think Julian Glover did a wonderful job here as Christatos. We interviewed Julian a while back, so you got to listen to that one. He is a true English gentleman. Just a joy to speak with. You'll love him.
Absolutely. And I also like the way, you talked about the interesting twist. Bond has to figure out which is the good guy and which is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Right. And you think about in Diamonds Are Forever when he has to figure out which is the real Blofeld, right? So
yeah. Who's the bad guy?
So the good guy is then Milos Colombo, played by Topol. Now, originally he was seen as a villain, but he turns out to be Bond's key ally. And Topol was perfect as Colombo. Everything he did, every scene he was in, it was just perfection. Mm-hmm. And as someone who grew up seeing Topol play Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, that's who I knew him as.
Yeah.
It was great to see him in a very different role. In fact, I didn't realize for a long time that it was the same guy.
Yeah.
the same actor.
He was awesome. Just terrific in that role. Now, you get to see here a more mature performance from Roger Moore as Bond. I'm going to put mature in quotes because obviously everything he did was good, but here you see a more mature performance from Roger Moore as Bond. While he was still charming, Bond's got to be, Moore dials back to comedy a whole lot in this movie and delivers one of the most serious and intense performances as Bond. When he's kicking Loke's car off the cliff with Loke in it, that was a great moment for Moore as Bond.
Yeah, we have to remember this was the first Eon production James Bond movie that had Michael G. Wilson involved in the writing.
Yeah.
I think that toned down some of the humor we got in the earlier Moore James Bond movies.
Yeah, and he did not like Roger Moore kicking the car off the cliff. He actually didn't want to do that. He kind of almost said at the time when they were filming, my Bond wouldn't do that. And they were saying, no, Bond's going to kick the car off the cliff. So he did it. But anyway, it's a great scene, and it looks like, he's into it in the movie. So that was great. Now, we really enjoyed Moore's performance here, the entire movie. This was perhaps the best blend of all of what we have come accustomed to know about Bond, and he delivers extremely well in this
now we talked about this being a little bit more balanced, a little less campy, except for the ending scene.
Okay. I don't mind the ending getting light and funny.
Yeah. Well, that was good because, he gets that call from Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
Right, and he rejects it.
Well, he was busy.
Well, yeah, he was busy, but
with a woman.
But Margaret Thatcher mistakes a parrot for 007. It was amusing. It was a nice, clean ending to wrap things up. Brought back a little more humor.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun there on a little more humor. But for me, I actually thought that was kind of fun because there was more seriousness in this movie.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
in short,
Oh, fine.
For Your Eyes Only is a more serious Bond espionage movie. It ditched the over-the-top campiness until the end, and it grounded this movie in a more believable reality without a lot of gadgets either.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Live and Let Die, 1973. Roger Moore was almost Bond before Live and Let Die. I'm going to point that out. Moore was considered for the role of James Bond in the 1960s before Sean Connery was cast. He was under contract, though, for the TV show, of course, The Saint, which prevented him from taking the role on earlier. Now,
Well, that's kind of interesting because the same thing happened to Pierce Brosnan, right?
yeah, exactly.
He had
Remington
Remington
Steele.
Steele. He couldn't get out of
Yeah.
that contract.
Yeah, Moore's Bond debut here, he brings a fresh, charming take to the role of Bond. He wanted to make it different. We all knew at the time how great he was in the Saint TV series. I watched every episode of the Saint, and he was excellent. Yeah, he was excellent in them all. They even mentioned Bond in one of the episodes as a woman he was dealing with in one of the episodes said something like, "I thought you were James Bond," which I thought was kind of cool.
And you can see how much influence Moore's portrayal of Simon Templar in The Saint crept into the role of James Bond.
Yes, a lot of Simon Templar in Bond, in his version of Bond. Right. Now, the unique blaxploitation inspired villainy, Yaphet Kotto as Dr. Kananga. There were a lot of black actors hired for this movie, which was a great thing at the time. Ian was always on the cutting edge of doing things.
Well, and it wasn't just the actors. I mean, think about the stunt people. Eddie Smith, the guy who drove that boat that drives through the wedding cake.
Yeah.
He was a founder of the Black Stuntmen's Association. And before that association was created in 1967, it was really common for white stuntmen to use makeup to appear black. And that actually ticked off some of these stunt guys. Sure. So they created this association.
Yeah.
Given the importance of race in Live and Let Die, it was great to see some of the members of the Black Stuntmen's Association doing some of the stunts in this movie.
Yeah. And actually, the jazz group they used for the New Orleans funeral was a real New Orleans jazz group. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of the jazz band that played.
Yeah, that was the Olympia Brass Band.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, that was a real brass band. They used the real people. That was fantastic.
That really was.
All right. It all played out well, really, with Kotto being a genuine star as Dr. Kananga and Mr. Big. Of course, he played both roles. Now, in the novel by Fleming, Mr. Big's name is really an acronym for Bonaparte Ignacy Gallia. That's it. It wasn't just the actor, but it was the stunt people, too, like you mentioned, Tom. It was really well done. Did it age well? No, it hasn't aged well, but it's still a fantastic movie.
With a lot of this being set in New Orleans,
yeah,
the voodoo and supernatural elements give it a distinct feel in this movie, and they're incorporated very well throughout. I mean, San Monique and Kanaga's lair, they were refreshingly different than anything we'd seen before in a Bond movie. The voodoo scenes, the torches, the snakes, it all made for something new and interesting for us to see.
Yeah, and I visited the voodoo shop in New York where Bond goes down and gets that snake.
The occult?
The occult shop. Yeah, it's still there and looks exactly like that. All right, the speedboat chase was fantastic. It's one of the best action sequences in the series.
Yeah, it is really good.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we have the introduction of Sheriff J.W. Pepper, played by Clifton James. That was cool. He was excellent in this movie. Audiences connected with him, and they liked him as they did with Jaws. And so they brought him back for the man with the golden gun. In that one, it was a stretch, and he wasn't as good. I mean, but the speedboat chase here, awesome, great. And then the watch gadget that was magnetic and had a buzzsaw in it was useful and cool. And they say that a hidden detail was that inside the case was engraved Roger Moore 007.
I didn't know that.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like how they do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, the crocodile stunt.
Yeah.
Right? At the crocodile farm was really good. I mean, the guy running across the backs of those crocodiles. Yeah. I'm going to shock you, Dan. It wasn't Roger Moore.
Oh, no, you're kidding.
It was Ross Kananga.
Yes.
It was done without CGI. Ross Kananga owned the crocodile farm.
Yeah.
And so they appreciated his work so much that they named the villain after him. And as a hidden piece of fun, Roger Moore as Bond was wearing crocodile shoes.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
Kananga had to as well, but crocodile shoes running over the crocodiles. Oh, there's something wrong with
Yeah,
that.
that was good. Now, I think Kaneko was a stuntman too, I believe. I think he was a stunt guy. Pretty sure. Anyway, and they got Paul McCartney and Wings' theme song. That's a classic. One of the best ever, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was sung in the movie. When Bond and Leiter are at the bar that was connected to Kananga's office, supposedly representing Harlem, New York, the singer on the stage is singing the song. So that was pretty cool. All right. In short, it's a very strong introduction to Moore as James Bond. But of course, as all the James Bond movies go, it didn't age as well.
Speaking of not aging as well, let's head out to space.
Yeah, let's go to space.
And
Let's
of course, we're talking Moonraker in 1979. It's infamous.
The next best Moore movie is Bond. Okay.
All right. So this one's infamous for its over-the-top space battle,
Yeah.
but still entertaining in a rather ridiculous way. Because Eon Productions wanted to capture the interest in space at the time as the first Star Wars movie was released in 1977.
Yeah.
And then we had Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Trek the Motion Picture in 79.
Oh, wow.
So For Your Eyes Only was bumped to 1981 so they could get Moonraker in. Well, the space stuff was so hot.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to make money, so there you go. Hey, so they moved Moonraker up. So James Bond in space, good or bad? I don't know. Hey, he almost made it into space in You Only Live Twice, remember? He was trying to board the spacecraft, but he had his oxygen unit with him, and they caught him with that. So, they tried to get him in space a long time before Moonraker. All right. So we get Jaws. Jaws returns, and he's lovable again. So here, bringing Jaws back was really well done.
And of course, this movie was spectacular visually with huge Ken Adam designed sets.
Yeah.
But it's also probably the most over the top and campy of the James Bond films. I mean, even Jaws was played more campy than he was in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah,
right?
Still likable.
Still likable, but a little more campy than he was before.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the gondola turns hovercraft scene though is so ridiculous that it's legendary. But I think actually the pigeon turning his head back and forth, that was the best part of that.
A lot of people hated that part.
I love that part. It's like,
but the thing about this movie is much of Moonraker is a really good spy movie. I mean, at least the first 3/4 of it.
Yeah.
Most people thought Bond going to outer space and Drax with the undetectable space station was a bit much. But was it entertaining? Yeah, it kind of was.
Yeah, and really, if you look at the original novel, which is really a good read, basically Drax was in the book as well. Or he had a rocket that was going to go up, and they thought London and England thought he was on their side, and he was going to bring him back down and blow up London. Well, that didn't play well after they landed on the moon in 1969 and everything else. In 1979, you couldn't have a rocket going up and coming down, so they did this story. But yeah, and was it good? Yeah, it was good enough. It grossed unadjusted $210.3 million in 1979-1980. At the time, it was the highest grossing Bond movie to date. And it wasn't exceeded, actually, until 1995's GoldenEye, which grossed $352 million. So, again, these are not adjusted grosses, but the real grosses at the time. So, okay. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch first 3/4 of it. It's great movie. Then we get the last quarter. But that brings us then to Octopussy in 1983.
Yeah.
And this was a decent Bond movie. It's a fun adventure film. It's got a Cold War plot. And so that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I think it was Moore's last truly good performance as Bond, obviously. It brought us to some exotic locations, India, Germany, and so on, with some impressive train sequences, too.
Well, you've got to have a train. It's a spy movie.
Yeah, I love trains and spy movies. That goes back all the way to 1935, 39 Steps. All right.
Yeah, and you also have to love the villain here, right? And you know how I think important the villain is in Bond movies.
Yeah.
And Louis Jourdan did a beautiful, suave, likable, nasty villain.
Yeah.
And I first became a Jourdan fan when he played the murdering food critic Paul Gerard in the Columbo TV series episode Murder Under Glass.
Oh, yeah.
And there are a lot of similarities with how Jourdan played both Gerard and Kamal Khan. Very, very similar characters.
Yeah. Hey, there were also some cool weapons like the yo-yo saw. Cool gadgets
Love
like
the yo-yo saw.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a cool gadget like the alligator submersible that Bond went back and forth to the palace with. That was kind of cool. And then the circus clown disguise scene, that's controversial among fans. But hey, Bond does what he has to do to get his mission accomplished. A lot of people didn't like to see Bond in a clown suit. Well, how else was Bond going to blend into a circus environment when the henchmen were after him? Hey, a clown suit, perfect. I mean,
yeah, I've got no problem with that clown suit. I mean, it worked for where he was with the plot and his location. It let him blend in and made it harder to be caught.
Yeah, some Bond fans hate that because he's in a clown suit, and some Bond fans hated that Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service was in a kilt. Come on! Sean Connery wore a kilt in real life, for crying out loud.
Deal with it.
All right, the bottom line, it's a fun yet somewhat uneven Bond movie. Some love it. Some think it's too silly. I think the last attack on the palace was a bit campy, with the circus personnel participating like they would be trained to risk their lives to do this. That part I didn't like. Anyway, all right, let's close out on the second to the bottom of the Bond movie. We already said the worst was A View to a Kill. So what's the second from the bottom? The Man with the Golden Gun, 1974. Why? Hey, there's some good and some bad. Christopher Lee as Scaramanga. He's one of the best Bond villains around. He was good.
Well, and for me, Scaramanga is one of the reasons I don't rate The Man with the Golden Gun as low as some people. Okay. I think a strong villain makes a Bond movie. And if you compare him to Stromberg, a much better villain.
Yeah, and he was related to Fleming. I think he was his cousin or second cousin.
There was something there, yeah.
Cousin once removed. I never understood all those things. The other thing was, I think, the Funhouse and the James Bond Beach. Come on. Those were cool elements of this movie.
Well, you think about the visual parts of that.
Yeah.
And you hadn't seen that part of Thailand, and most people in the world hadn't seen that yet because we hadn't started traveling as much.
Right, yeah. And the car jump stunt, super impressive. This really is one of the best stunts ever. So this alone helps the rating of this movie, in my view.
I love that stunt, that thing. Just like the way it just like so effortlessly just flips over in air. That was cool.
One take they did that. And great locations, like you mentioned, Thailand, Hong Kong, and so on. All well shot. But the weak plot and forgettable Bond girl, Britt Eklund, as Mary Goodnight.
Oh, yeah, she was in this movie, wasn't she?
Yeah, I mean,
I almost forgot because it wasn't great.
She is kind of forgettable. Yeah, so that wasn't so great. Now, they also overused the comedy. For instance, bringing back the character Sheriff J.W. Pepper. He was out of place with no reason to be where he was, encountering Bond again. And
and what a racist portrayal. Yeah. I mean, that just it actually diminished the movie. His character being there. He was great when we saw him before, but here out of place and way overtly racist.
Yeah, bottom line, wasted potential. The villain is great, but the movie itself, more or less forgettable. All right, here's our summary from top to bottom for us and for most people. The Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Octopussy, The Man with the Golden Gun, A View to a Kill. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. That's our story. Let us know what you think. This has been Dan.
And Tom.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Hey, help us out and tell a friend about our show. And subscribe. Thanks for spending time with us. We do appreciate it.